Tony and others. And we have Martin on Zoom with a picture of Napier behind him, but that's not where he is, and I think we'd prefer the picture of Cathedral Grove. We've got
Oh, that'll give me something to work on. Carry on.
yeah, if you could. So, Paddy, would you please open our meeting for us, please?
Happy. It's the same thing as happy. I'm not going to.
Ka ura tara ki tōna komata ka pari te tai ki tōna pūkenga, ko te puawai ka puawaitia he kākara tai āwhi o kōhaina ki te ao. As the sun achieves its zenith, and the oceans their tidal grasp within the whenua, and the bud that blooms into full blossom, and the senses that are harassed in a nice way by the environment. And these are gifts that are unsurpassed to us. Nō reira, e aku nei rangatira tēnei te mihi ki o koutou kaimua, kaimuri. E tika ana ki a mihi ki e rā ngā mate, kai runga ki tēnā, kai tēnā, kai tēnā o tata. Acknowledging that between the time that we left in 2020 and the time this first meeting of 2021, there have people who have been lost, perhaps to some of us here, but certainly in the wider Te Matawa Māui regions of Hawke's Bay. Nō reira, he mihi, he tangi, he poroporaki kia rata. Ko te rā hoki atu, haere atu rā. Haere takahia ki te wāhi, kia haere oki oki ai ki ngā mate, haere imua rā yokotu. So go to that place and leave us to attain and achieve those aspirations and that mahi that has been left for us. Nō reira, kei ngā kai kaunihira to our councillors, hoki maira ki tēnei whare nā kūtu. Councillors, welcome back to this, the point of mahi for 2021. Tēnei te mihi kia koe rā te tiamana, Rex, ka tika kia mihi kia koe. Nō reira, ka tira. I think as we agreed in 2020, or at its end, we were just going to go through the Karakia on the left-hand side. That was right, wasn't it? Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes, good. Just check. So, would someone like to set the pace or the mitter?
No, you're pretty good at doing it. You're the best, actually.
Yeah, the best.
Keep going.
Anyway, it's pretty good.
Very best.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tōna. Kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hei a kia mā te atakura, e tiro, e puka, e hau, ti hei maraura. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Petty. You do a very wonderful job, as Jeff stated. Okay, do we have any notices? Do we have any notices? Apologies, one from Mike Paku.
Yes.
Do we have any other apologies? Do we have no other apologies? Do we have someone to move the apologies, Rick?
I will.
And Jeff will second. All those in favour?
All
right. Thank you very much. Any conflict of interest declarations, particularly concerning the agenda today? If there are none, we'll move on. Confirmation of the minutes. Where are we there? Minutes, 16th of December.
I'll move.
Second.
Move, anyway, will second. All those in favour?
Aye.
Right, thank you very much. We'll move straight to item 11 then, significant organisational activities.
Thank you, Chair. We'll take the report as read, but before we take any questions, I'd just like to acknowledge those staff that worked through the summer period to keep our essential services going, particularly the environmental monitoring team that was monitoring water quality for recreational bathing sites. Through the holiday period, our road safety team that worked on Boxing Day on State Highway 5, offering cups of tea and coffee and what have you to weary travellers, but also those works group staff members that were keeping our regional parks and public areas clean and tidy through that period. And a special thank you to the plant pest team who had to work on the Chilean needlegrass response right through the very busy time over the summer, and particularly the difficult issues around CNG in the Tukituki River area and the work we've been doing there with gravel extractors to manage that. So it's always a big ask to have our staff working when others are having holidays, and we're just very grateful for their efforts in doing so.
Questions for James? Welcome, Mr. Bailey. Yes, well.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask James or one of the team to elaborate a bit on the Chilean needlegrass, the communications, of all the gravel extractors being communicated with, and what's the feedback? Do they all understand why and cooperation?
So the situation that has arisen is that Chilean needlegrass was found in the gravel riverbeds of the length of the Tukituki all the way to the mouth. As a consequence of that finding, we issued a notice of direction to all of the gravel extractors that are registered with us to take gravel in commercial quantities from the river. We've also used social media to advise the general public, because there is a permitted activity rule that enables members of the public to take small amounts of gravel, and we don't think that's a high risk area. It is the commercial quantities that we're most concerned about. Unfortunately, evidence came to our attention that not all of the gravel extractors were following that notice of direction, and the notice of direction required that the gravel only be used for purposes in which the gravel is contained, such as in the beds of buildings being constructed. In one case, gravel was, that I'm aware of, gravel was used for a farm track from the area, despite the notice of direction. So we took a decision just prior to Christmas to suspend all gravel extraction on the Tukituki until such time as we've got confidence that those risks can be appropriately managed. That was, as a consequence, a disruption to a number of the gravel extractors who have contractual obligations to deliver that gravel to the construction industry. They do have options to obtain the gravel from other places, however, at additional cost. And so what we've done is work with some of the affected gravel extractors that have sought help to find alternative sites for them to take gravel from. And so we're continuing to work with those. It is an unfolding situation, but at this point in time, we do believe that the risks of further spread of Chilean needlegrass from the Tukituki River outweigh the benefits of low-cost extraction for those that are supplying the construction industry proximal to the Tukituki River. So not everybody is happy about the situation because there are operators that we believe have generally been compliant with the notice of direction who are feeling unfairly penalised by the situation. But we do need to have confidence that all operators are playing by the rules, and that we can properly assure you and the community that the risks are being adequately managed before we allow continued extraction.
Let it follow.
Yes, certainly.
Just are the risks being considered? So a lot of people say, if we're going to go to that measure, what about carting of livestock? The seed in sheep's wool, the carting of hay, other users driving and spending time on the riverbeds, and then obviously leaving that area. Are the other risks being considered, and are they classed as high?
So in terms of the riverbed, certainly what we've attempted to do is use social media to advise the general public of the risk of them transporting it off the riverbed. As I said before, I think we believe the risks of that are relatively low. Most of the users of that environment will drive with a vehicle down onto the riverbed, and the likelihood of transporting seed, on the tyres of a standard vehicle into another paddock are relatively low. So it is the removal of gravel itself that presents as the major risk. In terms of the spread through livestock, that issue principally relates to the controls that we place on known affected properties, and what I'm happy to do is provide a further briefing, perhaps as a follow-up to council. I have asked the group manager responsible to report verbally to the Environment Integrated Catchment Committee meeting next week on those further matters of what regulatory options or non-regulatory options we've got to further control this spread.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
Oh,
Chair.
Henry first.
And kia ora koutou, no mai hoki mai. I'd just like to reiterate what James has said about the staff who have worked over the summer. No doubt they'll probably be the similar lot as the COVID lockdown, so ngā mihi nui kia koutou. So 2 questions, one relating to point 18 around the fencing inspection and the data collection through the drone activity. Is there any opportunity to also capture information around riparian planting at the same time as inspection of fencing? So that's one question. Yep.
So I believe that the drone inspections are also capturing that information, but I'm happy to have that confirmed given that the group manager responsible is unfortunately in a meeting with Osprey today.
Thank you. And the second question is relating to point 64. So the compliance staff have identified the 7 remaining properties that still have not provided their FEMPs. So a few questions around that. How long have they had to produce their FEMP? And what are the implications of them not doing that? And what are the next steps for the organisation to make sure that happens?
So they have had several years to complete this, and there have been extensive efforts to advise them of their obligations. So the next step is enforcement, and that typically would be a prosecution for undertaking what becomes a non-complying activity, which is farming in the catchment without a farm environment plan. Our preference has been to work with landowners, and the overwhelming majority, something like 98% of the landowners have complied, and so it's really disappointing we've still got these outstanding properties. One of the reasons why it's taken a while to work out who is non-complying is that there are a number of parcels of land which are complex by way of their ownership and their status and what have you. So where it's a major farming operation, it's very clear who it is, what it is, etc. There are various smaller bits of parcels of land which might be in a leased arrangement or a leased and then subleased arrangement, which might be part of a larger farming unit or not, etc. And we've had to work through some of that, and even contacting the responsible landowners in some cases has been challenging. So it has been a drawn-out affair, but we're certainly at the point of having no further tolerance for landowners not having farm environment plans that they're required to do. I'm happy to provide an update as a follow-up item for the next council meeting on where that's at.
Just one more comment just to add to that. And I raise it because we're going to be coming into Plan Change 9 and Tank and needing FEMPs from them, and there might be some learnings from the situation also. But if we're going to embark on needing to have more compliant FEMPs through this organisation, we have to understand where we draw our lines at what stage, because 2.5 years, 3 years maybe, that's just not good enough.
Look, totally agree, and the regulations that are coming under the amendments to the Resource Management Act that were made last year, requiring farm environment plans by law, as aside from what sits within a regional plan, is going to create a new expectation around these being universal, and it's certainly my hope that the farming community at that stage understands that this is a national requirement for all commercial farming operations and is not something that's remotely discretionary.
Thank you. Great.
Point 23, which is around the high resolution or very high resolution aerial photography around riparian strips around the region, 217 sites. Does that include the urban waterways and their riparian margins?
I don't have that information to hand and need to come back to you, Councillor.
Could you let us know, please?
Yes.
Thanks. So if it, well, regardless if it does or doesn't, how are those sites chosen?
So look, I would assume that they are based on statistical representation, but again, I would need to provide further advice on that.
Okay, if you're cool, because it pretty much aligns up with a lot of the freshwater reform that's going through, which doesn't include the urban stuff. So if more information would be great. Thanks.
Neil.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Two questions. James, I wonder whether we could have back to Council the next activities report as part of a whole region component, is to pick out the area, the hotspot funding regime, which is we're up to 3 years down the track now, and if we could aggregate or pick out the Whakaki hotspot, the got Ahuriri, Karamu, Coastal and Patuma. If we could have a report pulling those out, giving us a triennial performance report for that. Is that possible?
So a report of that nature is in preparation. It had been my hope that it would go to the Environment Integrated Catchment Committee meeting next week,
Good, yeah.
but I am told that it's now going to the next meeting as there's further work to do to pull that whole picture
Okay,
together.
so
But
better place there as a report as opposed to...
I believe so. I think that's the appropriate committee for it.
Okay, just second question, Mr. Chair. Just going to item 60 on the activities report, which is Central Hawke's Bay wastewater discharge consent. I see there's good progress on the upgrades. Can you tell us the level of current compliance, therefore, with resource consents resulting from the improvements?
So I can't. Katrina may be able to. I'm not sure. Sorry? Still non-compliant.
Okay.
So the discharge of probably ammonia levels higher than they consented to do so.
Can we report at the next activities the level of improvement in compliance in regard to those consents?
Sure.
Kara. Nā me o te tauhou, koutou katoa. Just the lava readings I see with the first item on the recreational water quality. On the 29th of December, peak time in Mahia, the numbers double out there or triple. Mangawhio Lagoon, which is Oraka, never get the pippies. That was their Ecology reading was 3010, and Whangawihi, 910. Well, Whangawihi goes out into the rocks where we gather a lot of kaimoana as well. So they're both well-known kaimoana gathering sites, especially Oraka. I mean, people go there to swim. It's probably one of the safest places to swim, but also they gather kai every day in the summer. So I notified Rongomai Wahine Iwi Trust about this. Well, just a little bit concerned about the kai gathering, and I did get a hold of one of the scientists here, and I did ask, was that level safe, especially when you're talking about gathering pipi, ne kai really. Yeah, and there were numerous high readings of E. coli and Nuhaka in the Wairau River over the summer period. I just want to find out if that's safe. When does it get unsafe? Because you've got a lot of people getting kai there.
So those numbers do sound to me to exceed certainly what meets the contact recreation safe levels. So that would be in excess of what's safe for collection of kaimoana.
Wouldn't that be on our website,
So if it's a recreational bathing site, but we are monitoring in those cases for recreational bathing purposes, not for guidance around the collection of kaimoana. That is typically managed by the Ministry for Primary Industries and with the District Health Board, and they are the ones that issue alerts and closures in relation to the collection of kaimoana.
So can anybody tell me what level is unsafe?
We'll find out.
We'll find out?
We'll find out.
So 3,010, so that's what, so many times over our limit. Would that require
Wouldn't
a
think that'd be
sign?
safe.
Yeah, wouldn't it? You'd need a sign.
We will find out, Michelle. Thank
Yeah,
you.
because there was no signage. And just one other, just in the northern catchments area, a couple actually. Northern catchments area, would have been good to note that there's a big spraying and fencing program going on in Waitewa the next 3 months, and that's also helping with the planting we've been doing at home and all that. So that would have been a good something to add for Nathan to add on to this report. And the other thing is, on the 21st and 22nd, there was a wastewater plant malfunction. They say there wasn't any damage to the environment, but on that day we noticed, and I don't know if it was algal bloom, but I took a photo of it and I did contact the pollution hotline. Did notice a discharge. I don't know if it was a discharge or it was the bloom, but it was a crimson big area on the main drag and Marine Parade. So I'd like to know what that's all about, because people weren't allowed to use their washing machines, they weren't allowed to let their water go down the sink because it was 2 days. So yeah, that's what they said on the post. And the other thing is, as I I was in Bridgepa a couple of days ago and noticed that Paritua and Kariwiri were bone dry again. There's no mention of that. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Michelle. Just in relation to the last comment, and this is probably a slightly general statement, but I was advised on Monday that our low flow monitoring in most of our key lowland places is only a matter of days behind where it was this time last year, which is to say we're tracking very, very closely to the conditions we experienced early in the drought last year. And so if no further rain comes, we'll be finding ourselves in low flow situations with irrigation bans coming on reasonably imminently. So yeah, it's probably no surprise to anyone that's been here for the last few weeks that we are in that situation, and so many of our lowland streams will be at risk, and spring-fed streams will be at risk of drying up. In relation to your questions about wastewater at Waitewa District Council, Katrina, do you want to make any comment about our contemporary enforcement action on Waitewa wastewater?
Yes, so we've been investigating a number of incidents, of course, at Waitewa, and are about to take some multiple enforcement action for multiple events in Waitewa.
Were you advised of that malfunction, or was there any?
Yes, so the team have been looking very closely at Mahia and wastewater systems there as well. Ultimately, you know, we're in a position where as well we've got Waitewa trying to seek their consent. At the same time, we've got investigations ongoing on multiple fronts with them at the moment.
Exactly.
Chair,
Malfunction.
Yes, Penny.
can I
Yes.
just add paragraph 30 in the area manager activity section of the report? Can I seek through you a date change or correction? It should be the 29th of January and not the 20th. That's this coming Friday for the tripartite meeting.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Well picked up, Penny. Okay, do we have anyone to move that we receive?
I'll move.
Thank you. Second, Will. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. It just tells you about the importance of all the things, so thanks for raising those issues, Michelle. Okay, we now have item 12, follow-ups from the previous meeting.
Chair, these have all either been addressed or there is commentary in the paper in response to the questions or in relation to the Pedigree Arena issue that's ongoing. I'm happy to take any questions.
Rick.
Just a follow-up for the, not in here really, but it was, the Koima requests. We were going to get a little bit of a report as to what happened to them. I haven't seen that. But we had Leanne said the ombudsman had a view about it, And you were going to send us a summary so we could get our heads around what was happening with them. I haven't seen that yet.
We'll follow that up.
Sorry?
We'll follow that up.
That's
Yep.
good. Just the trail's gone cold. Can't quite find it, so it'd be good to see it.
Anyways,
Yeah, along the same lines, point 8 around the draft conditions of the discharge consent, Napier City Council, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, that hasn't been distributed yet. So that hasn't been received by myself or Councillor Curtin from Malcolm Miller. So if we can have that distributed
we'll
to
follow that up.
councillors, please.
We did believe that had been undertaken, so we'll chase it up.
any other questions related to this?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, sorry, Martin.
that's all right, just quietly sitting over here in the corner, that's fine. Just the item on Pedigree Arena, just wanting some clarity. We were quite clearly advised at our last meeting that the consent application was going to be lodged the following day. Clearly that hasn't happened, but there's a reference to a submission consistent with our resolution requesting conditions of consent. I guess I'm just wanting to understand where that's at. The application hasn't been lodged. Normally you'd lodge a submission after an application had been notified. Is there anything that could be added by way of progress in terms of what we'd requested in exchange for consenting in principle to the stop bank option?
Chris?
My understanding is that consent hasn't been submitted, but I have instructed staff to contact the Pedigree Arena's engineers, so I guess there's no surprises, particularly with our project. We're doing it in the same area just to initiate those discussions and cooperation. So I would expect some discussions to occur over the next couple of weeks.
Any other, Rick?
Happy to move the report be received.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Anyway, all those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll go to minor items not on the agenda. I just wonder, I talked about item 13. Welcome, Mr. Mohi. We have some old timers joining us today, I see. I just want to make a little comment on minor items. Minor item we did last time. It is an opportunity for the councils to bring something up that they regarding the region that they think is important, which is not on the agenda. We just need to be careful when we do raise these issues that it has a positive flavour to it. Even if it's a negative, you want something corrected, but we just need to keep that and just remember that it's not a discussion time. It is a point. You're bringing up something that you think is pertinent, and everyone takes it on board, but it's not a moment of debate. So let's call for minor items not on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
social ecology, it's the topic that I brought up last meeting but didn't get to speak to because I had to leave. So if I could just table that, please.
Jareth?
State Highway 2 land cultivation.
State Highway 2.
Dig it up and put some crops in.
Any others? I have one. Try H-buds. Any others? We have 3. Okay, we'll just leave it at 3. Thank you very much. So we will now move to item 14, which is a decision item, and we have 2 guests, Tony and Gus. I will bring you up to the front, please. Regional Economic Development Review. And they've both done a huge amount of work on this, especially, Tony, you coming up the front too? You sure? Okay.
What's wrong?
You're
got some bad news or
Gus
something?
nomads up there, aren't you? Before we hand the floor over to you, Gus, to just take any questions and maybe do a brief outline of your report, I just want to thank you on behalf of us and our community for the incredible work that you've done. Because it required a lot of research, a lot of talking to a lot of people, and I think you've done a marvellous job outlining the situation and your recommendations. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I think I might pass over. James, did you want to kick off just very briefly?
Yeah. Look, just a little bit of context. Towards the end of 2019, in starting to think towards the development of the next long-term plan, the chief executives across the 5 councils recognised that we were going to face some choices around the future investment in our business and industry development support, and started thinking about whether or not the arrangements that we'd entered into historically were fit for purpose. Soon after that, we got a series of requests that went from very informal to increasingly formal from Business Hawke's Bay for greater funding support. And at that time, we had to indicate to Business Hawke's Bay that we were entering into long-term plan development and couldn't make ad hoc decisions in relation to further resourcing, but did see it as an opportunity to consider not only our funding for Business Hawke's Bay, but our funding more broadly for business and industry development in the region. And just make the observation that when we talk about economic development, it's often a really broad concept, and an awful lot of what councils do influences economic development, whether it's the provision of infrastructure, things like we do in transport, our regulation of natural resources and what have you. So this piece of work was actually more narrow than the full range of activities undertaken by local government to support economic development, and was more around how we support individual businesses or individual sectors within the economy to grow and develop, and that includes investment, attraction and regional promotion for visitor tourism. And so we procured the services of Gus and the Giblin Group to review the totality of our collective investments across the 5 councils and provide some advice to lead into the long-term plan. We had hoped to have completed that work and be in a position for you to make decisions alongside your colleagues of the other 4 councils within the region as part of the current long-term plan development process. But look, in the event, the disruption that we had from COVID last year meant that we were later procuring this work and completing it than we had ideally hoped. And we also recognised late in the process that given the many and varied stakeholder interests in this, that it's important that we don't rush to a solution just to meet our long-term plan timetable. And so as per this council and the other 4 councils, we're effectively rolling over our current funding arrangements for industry and sector support within all of our long-term plans at this point in time, with a view to commissioning some further work of the Giblin Group and our key stakeholders to in a less rushed and more measured way, come up with a durable plan for how we fund and support activity in this area across the 5 councils over the remainder of this calendar year, that would likely lead us into some long-term plan amendments or next year's annual plan process, should there be decisions to make changes to the current arrangements. And the paper does just note that Business Hawke's Bay is currently in a process which they have advised publicly they're in, which is consultation with their staff around winding up their services. And I understand that consultation has been extended to the end of this week, so they are still in a process of considering their longer term options, but they have made clear both publicly and to the councils that their situation's not sustainable with their current level of funding. So that's where that sits. So Gus, if you'd like to perhaps tell council about what you found.
Sure. So we had an opportunity at the end of last year to go through it in detail, so I'm not going to do that again. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but just at a very high level, what the review found was that there weren't any major gaps in service delivery. So Hawke's Bay was providing the things you would expect where there was a clear role for government intervention. The key thing is, though, that we are, as a region, not funding those activities very much. Often those activities, projects are being done by one or less FTE. And that will be having the effect of not delivering the effectiveness of those activities that we would ordinarily want. The report that you have read in your papers outlines 3 key areas in that. And so one of the things is that, you know, central government's playing a much, much larger role in economic development than it has done for many decades. And so Hawke's Bay needs to be really super sharp in the way that it engages with central government in order to leverage those considerable resources. And that will continue to be the case in a post-PGF world. So, and in fact may even be more important because it's going to be a little bit more complex about how we attract those funds. There's also, we know through COVID and our horticulture issues that it's really important as a region that we work with speed and agility to respond to the things that are confronting our industry and people. So being able to be agile in the way that we design services and provide interventions where there's a clear role for government is really important. And I think, you know, having done the review, one of the things that we have not done as a region in the past is we've never really given our economic development agencies the real mana and mandate to fully speak on behalf of the region. So they've been a bit denuded because we haven't been clear that they are that is our organisation, they are our people. And so there's an opportunity to really bring that for Hawke's Bay so it's clear for investors, it's clear for people wanting to come to the region, and it's clear in organising industry voices to get them around the table to work out what we need to do collectively. So I think those are the main opportunities. There's certainly some opportunities to for greater regional coherence, and they relate to sort of greater clarity over roles in relation to the activities and services that are available to business. There's certainly some opportunities around information sharing, and I think the investment attraction space could do with we could be clearer about who's in the lead there and the collaboration that's required on that. So I'll leave it at that, and happy to answer any questions.
Questions? I'll start. Neil?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Gus, for the paper. Look, I want to take you to the actual council paper itself, and I'm not clear where it's reported in your report, but I want to take you to the key findings in your report at paragraph 29, and you've already stated there. Have you got that in front of you?
Yes.
Yeah. So paragraph 29, there are no major gaps in the type of services and activities being delivered. Quite a bold statement, and I want to test the efficacy of that key finding.
Sure. When
at paragraph 39, we've got Matariki as the main focal point for regional economic development work. The concern among stakeholders that Matariki is not delivering on its promise. And if we read further at the case for change 40.3, there is concern that there are unhelpful and competitive behaviours in the system, and at 40.8, business Hawke's Bay's financial sustainability is highlighted. So on one breath you're saying that there is no major gap in service, and yet we have almost a complete failure of Matariki itself, and if you like, the failure of business Hawke's Bay. So I'm trying to balance what is patently obvious in front of me with what your statement is saying.
Sure. So it's a really good question. The gap relates to the kind of service. So there is a range of services and activities that you would expect where there's a clear role for government, and they're outlined in the paper. There's a big table, and we kind of tick the boxes on having set up the system to deliver those activities. But what we haven't done as a region is really provided the implementation support to do those effectively. And those are the issues that you're seeing around Matariki, around the support for the PO, the different PO, just the services, the funding that's been made available for business Hawke's Bay. So the issues are relating to how we've funded and supported the activities rather than the gaps in the activities themselves.
Well, if I could just follow up, Mr. Chair, if I can take you then to paragraph 30.1, most effectively leveraging the resources of others in private sector, etc. region needs to be well organised and focused to maximise the opportunity. Surely the role and deliverable for Matariki. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And yet you're still quite happy to tell me that there are no failings in delivery.
Oh, it's not. I'm not saying there's no failings in delivery. I'm saying that there's no gaps in the kind of typical activities and services that you would set up. But there's certainly some issues around how much support and funding we've provided in order to do those things effectively.
Would you agree that there's been a failure of leadership then from Matariki in this whole process?
I won't comment on that. I think that if we didn't have Matariki, we'd want to construct it. I think it's a great thing. I think it's a new thing, it's evolving, and it clearly is not going to be perfect overnight. I think it's a great base to work from. So my view is there are some things we could do around governance and implementation support that would really help Matariki be more effective.
Just hasn't done its job.
It's new and it's evolving. You know, you can't get things perfect overnight, I would say.
You should be a politician, Gus.
Yeah, I was thinking the same.
Well, I'm trying to be kind to the people and
let's not be kind to you because it costs ratepayers a lot of money.
Yeah, but you know these things, economic development's really complex, and it's about getting all of these moving parts and people together, and that takes time, and then getting the priority and focus takes time, and the monitoring and evaluation. So, you know, it's a hard gig.
Craig.
Thanks. In fact, Matariki has been around for a while. I remember launching it with Mr. Joyce actually a while ago.
Yeah. I watched.
Yeah.
I watched as well. Disbelief.
Yeah, and then they dropped the ball after we launched it. Paige, but in your report, could you just expand on the options or solutions to Matariki? Because you quite specifically talk about a change in governance to Matariki. And you know, it's very well intended. There are many people and organisations around that table. But there's a bit of sand in those gears. So could you describe how you think that governance could change, or should change, not just talking about the allocation of funds you're talking about in there, just because money's not the issue there, it's there's a bit more to it than that.
So I've only been to one Matariki meeting in order to present a report. So I'm not an expert on Matariki. It wasn't a focus of this particular exercise, but certainly what your stakeholders have said, quite a few of them, was that it wasn't. You've got these different governance. You've got your top governance group. Can't even remember the name of it. Where your big.
The executive steering group, and then there's the governance group.
Yeah, so the governance group and the executive steering group, and it's not clear what the relationship is between the governance group and the executive steering group. And so, you know, when you're constructing governance, you need to be really clear about the roles at each level. And if this group is saying something, is it commissioning work, then the executive steering group then needs to follow up on, and has the executive steering group then got the resources in order to follow up on that work? I think that's probably part of the missing thing. The governance group is an awesome opportunity to bring key people together to have the conversations that the region needs. What is not so clear is that what comes out of those conversations, is that immediately directing ESG, and does ESG have the resources then to follow that up?
Okay. And then just further to that, on page 99, you talk about creating a regional pool of funds to be used to investigate economic development opportunities throughout the region. You don't mention the possibility of HBRIC in there, because there's obviously this entity is already the key stakeholder on that one, or shareholder. And I'm interested in you expanding on that again to try and turn the wheel a bit quicker, because just like your explanation of Matariki, a lot of the bits are in place, but we're using the wrong petrol, or the dots aren't joined quite as well as they could be.
Yeah, so if I step back, so one of the key considerations of the CEs was, are there opportunities to get greater regional coherence, right? And at the moment, if an opportunity comes along, like the film school opportunity, it's ad hoc, so everyone's got to quickly get together and then decide, is this worth pursuing? Who's got what money available? We'll chuck that in the pot, blah, blah. So it's time intensive. It's not that it is necessarily counter to a strategy, but it's not clear that it's all lined up with what the region has said that is wanting to pursue. So I think there is opportunity to say, if Marariki is our strategy and it's clear about what our strengths, opportunities and capabilities are, then we need something which is going to support opportunities as they come along. So I'm agnostic on what fund or which organisation might play that role, but we do need something which makes it easier for the region to say, yes, that opportunity is worth pursuing because it is consistent with our strategy.
Okay, thanks.
Rick.
Yeah. I've got several questions about this. Firstly, you talk about your rate of return, ROI. In most of these entities today, a couple of them for myself, one of them is the staff are given $1 million and they need to put in through the door $20 million worth of business. If there's $1 million, we want $20 million. Others, $1 million for 10. That's what they do. I don't see the sort of KPIs in here of that at all. In fact, I see the KPIs as being, in my view, really soft. So, what comment do you have on that? What analysis have you got on that?
The stuff is really difficult in economic, the attribution to activity and impact. And it's always the case that economic development agencies are trying to make the case that they've provided a good return on investment. So they've constructed KPIs and outcome frameworks differently. This is an opportunity for us to think about what, on Hawke's Bay, what that looks like. We don't have a clear outcome framework. Matariki is not underpinned yet by a clear outcome framework. And so that stuff you co-design and work out what's important. So, but these measures drive different behaviours. So it's not a simple arithmetic, but you can do different things, soft or quite specific.
So why would we move forward with spending more money? We don't have any measurable KPIs. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So why would we continue to put money into this?
Well, I would say, well, this activity is really important. We don't have really clear KPIs, so we should be working on the KPIs. We should be really clear. We've got broad objectives and outcomes set in Matariki and in the council strategies, but we've not translated them into specifically what that means for us. How can we track that over time?
Well, I just think that, anyway, I'll move on to the next thing. There's two elements of a policymaker's toolkit. One is the counterfactual. So in your analysis here, what is the counterfactual we've been given? We're told this is what we do. So what's the counterfactual in here? I don't see it.
So the counterfactual are you talking about the counterfactual of moving forward, the recommendations and moving forward, the options for moving forward?
No, well, counterfactual is we do this,
yep.
And the counterfactual is if you don't do this, this is the outcome.
Yep.
And I'm yet to be convinced that in not doing it would be any worse off.
So the counterfactual...
If you haven't got KPIs you can measure, so we don't do anything, are we going to be worse off? So you should be able to demonstrate that. There is no counterfactual in your analysis. Good work, beautifully written, almost poetry on occasions. But I'm just saying that you haven't got some tough questions here, answers here to me.
This is an ongoing debate in economic development, right? From playing a relatively hands-off role and just letting business get on with it, right through to being more interventionist around particular activities, and there will be always an ebb and flow on this. And as I said earlier, the attribution around these activities and impact is really difficult. But what we have seen, both in New Zealand and internationally, is a greater movement towards more interventions around working particularly in the startup entrepreneur space and working with clusters of firms to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do themselves. So those are clear activities that most regions and provinces in the world are supporting these days.
But with respect, that's not an answer to the question. You're telling me we're doing this because we're doing it because we're doing it, and other people are doing it because they're doing it. You haven't told me, well, if we don't do it, what the circumstance is. I move to my third leg. I'm being difficult, as you probably guess. It's my job on occasions. And it's about the old economics opportunity cost. So where's the analysis of opportunity cost? So we spend our money here, we don't do these things. So, for example, would we be better off to put the same amount of money we've got into an investor fund like an angel investor fund? Just say, forget all this other stuff going here. Have a group of people apply, and if you want to start up a business, here's some cash for you, we'll take some shares. Now, would we actually have better economic growth and output from that? Again, this is an alternative view. You said as here's one world view. What other views about how we might do this? Where are they in the report?
Well, that wasn't part of the scope of the report, but if you would like that done, I would be very happy to do it for you.
Just send you the cheque.
Yes.
Rick, I'd just like to comment, because it's not in the report, but so I'm a great believer that the economy will be driven by the private sector, as you know. And it will not be driven by bureaucrats and it will not be driven by politicians. But the private sector, particularly in Hawke's Bay, does not operate in a vacuum. They require, our private sector, water storage. They require seasonal labour. And to get those things, you have to get the support of the government. And the government want to see Hawke's Bay work as a unitary. Even though some people in Hawke's Bay don't want that, they want to see us work together. And Matariki is a wonderful construct pushed on us in surprise by, because I was at the meeting and it was a great surprise to all of us, but actually as it evolved is a wonderful construct between the local councils and the treaty groups. So that no one can say that does not represent Hawke's Bay. And if we could work on that and get that galvanised, it's a vehicle to represent us at a national level on these critical things. I only mentioned two, water storage or water security and RSEs. But unless we get community support on those things, then it doesn't work. So private enterprise, then they need roads and they need all the other things to help them get to where they want to be. But they do not work in a vacuum. And we do need a regional community approach to some of these critical things which support our private people getting on and driving our economy.
Thank you for that intervention, that speech. Can I respond by a question to you as the chair?
Sure you can. I'll put the question to James, of course, but
no, you are a representative of Matariki. Can you identify 3 achievements the Matariki group has achieved, 1 year in the last 3 years, which are its sole endeavour alone?
So I actually think it's a great achievement that we actually got together in the first
so we
instance.
met. That's an achievement.
No, that's an achievement, and you might be quite cynical about that. But actually, the fact that we can get in the same room and with each other and have a conversation has been an achievement within itself. They are struggling. I agree that they are struggling to get to the nub of the issues, but I do believe with perseverance they will. And I don't think we throw the bathwater out yet. I think we persevere and we make it work because we need it to work.
Well, can I just
Is that a political answer too?
No, can I just respond by saying the fact that you list one of its achievements they've met is about the same as me getting to exam and putting my name at the top of the exam paper expecting 10% marks for that. I'm frustrated that we've put all this money in and I can't see runs on the board, to be honest with you. I'm being the curmudgeon here. I think someone has to sort of call it tough. And if you can prove me wrong...
Well, okay. Before James starts, I want to talk about runs on the board. They supported the RSEs. They generally got in behind the RSEs, and that's big for our region.
Well, I supported RSEs too, so is that an achievement for me?
No, I know, but the region, from a region, I know, but some people might not. So we were able to do a regional approach to the minister on that particular issue.
It's become a rubber stamp.
Chair, could I just make the observation that I think Matariki, since its inception, has suffered from a mismatch of people's expectations for what it is compared to the reality of what it is. Matariki is a forum. It's not an entity in its own right, and it doesn't have any resources, and we haven't put large amounts of resources into it. for the particular reason that each of the organisations participating have their own processes around accountabilities for their own resources, and that's one of the challenges. You can't get the 5 councils, let alone all the other stakeholders involved, which is sort of 7 or 8 government agencies, all of our treaty partners, multiple business representatives, to all put their resources in and co-manage those resources, because we've all got recourse back to tables such as this. So what it is a forum in which everybody's activity within the region is visible to one another, and what we seek to do is align our activities so that the whole is more than the sum of the parts. And the Chair has mentioned water security. So one of the lead actions under Matariki for this council was the delivery of our water security program. Now, you could say that Matariki has added no value to that. On the other hand, this council has crowded in over $20 million worth of funding from central government, and as the Chair has indicated, what central government wanted to see in making that investment was that it had broader regional support and was just not something pushed by this council and this council alone. And so I think the counterfactual of us not continuing down this path and investing and being better organised is that we miss out on central government funding, which I think is the point that you make, and other regions that are better organised will leverage that funding to a greater extent. So that is, I guess, both the counterfactual and the opportunity cost. What I observe is that the resourcing around the coordination of Matariki and for some of the potential projects is probably undercooked, and it is inherently difficult as a very broad church. The executive steering group that I sit on has 25 people sitting around a table representing, as I say, 7 or 8 government departments. Because we're trying to do the social inclusion part, working with tangata whenua, helping business, developing critical infrastructure, it's actually a complex ecosystem of activity across the region, which, the strategy is identified, all needs to come together if we are to have everybody in the region benefit from economic growth, as opposed to just focusing on very narrow sectors and helping them out. So it is by its nature incredibly ambitious an undertaking. But I'm with the Chairman that it's worth us persevering on, and I think the question now that this review is prompting is, are we willing to actually knit ourselves together even more and put more of our resources on the table, if you like, for more collective decision making than we have up until now?
I knew I should have got James to answer the question.
I always thought he had a stunning career available to him in politics. He's managed to make
No
these
chance.
things look really good. What?
It's just not perfect, but it's the best one we've got.
It's as good as, yeah.
Chair, are we still in question time? Or
Yeah, we're doing questions or discussion?
Or what would you like, Chair?
Well, we have a report, and
Okay,
the
can
comment
I
on the report is good.
Comment is
Yeah,
okay. Thank you.
Got the comments now.
So at the end of point 5, I'm glad to see you've highlighted Hawke's Bay tourism, and why? Because there are KPIs. We've just talked about them. They're measurables. We might not like the KPIs. That's fine, but at least we know they're there and measurable. So thank you for highlighting that. What I can relate to the most in our paper is point 22, around the impact framework and where we have to move next, especially around the intervention logic with some short, medium and long-term goals. I think that's really crucial on how we improve the situation. And then the last part relates to point 3 in the recommendations. And it talks about you doing stage 2 or the second stage, possibly. That's what we decide. Now, are the terms of reference drawn up on what questions we get you to answer in that stage 2 review? So this might be a one for James.
So that's a work in progress in terms of the scoping exercise that we're working through with Gus at the moment around that next stage.
Because that's quite critical, what questions we want Gus to answer.
And very happy to bring back to this table. Just given that we're doing this with 4 other councils, I need to work with the other chief executives around.
I think we're worth having that opportunity to do that.
Absolutely, and we are considering a regional collaboration day of the 5 councils, and it might be that that's an opportunity to have some further discussion around the questions you want answered and the scoping of this work.
Okay.
And the key aspects are captured in Draft key aspects are captured in paragraph 49.
Yeah. Thank you, that's me.
Questions or comments? Neil, you must.
Well,
So then we'll.
I'm interested to get a view as to whether, I mean, we've tabled today, I think, and traversed the governance structure and the leadership which it's been mandated to provide, and my own view is that it's abjectly failed to provide that leadership, despite the wonderful words of our chair and chief executive. Are we setting ourselves up to fail again by having the structure? And I'll just preface that by saying the councils are being asked to pay, and we've got a regime to do this next phase. I'm concerned that those most affected, those leading the entity, are almost to the side of this, deciding on what those priorities are. So are we setting up a further failure of leadership by not passing to Matariki itself if you like, the driving? They should be in the driving seat. Why are they not in the driving seat on this? Why is it left to the four councils to be in the driving seat?
Well, my understanding is that Matariki is going to play a very strong role in the co-design process, if not leading it. James, is that right?
That's the intention, yes. Yeah.
But they're not going to play.
Well, when we look at who is around that table and who has been funding, so councils are contributing a considerable amount of the effort. Central government have been, I think, generous funders, particularly through the Provincial Growth Fund and over the last few years, of a bunch of the activity that sits under there, including the program management, which they have funded, and there has also been funding support and resourcing coming from Te Kahui Ohanga as well. So, as well as the Business Hawke's Bay representatives include corporate sponsors there. So PanPac has been at the table throughout Matariki, and they've been a foundational funder of Business Hawke's Bay alongside Unison, Port and Napier. So
I don't see anyone listed down here as and the amount they're going to put in.
So look in the next phase of this. Certainly, it is our intention that the Giblin Group's costs are picked up by the councils, but we are expecting participation in the process by a large number of other people, and they'll have to fund that contribution that they make. The reason for this is because this piece of work is primarily about our funding and the decisions made by central government or other partners as to their contribution to a new entity all lies ahead. And it may well be that we come up with a model that results in the post-treaty settlement groups making a contribution, central government making a contribution, and then there's a conversation with the business community about whether they wish to continue to invest in this space in the way they have up until now.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Yes, certainly, Martin, then I'll come to you, Will.
Thank you. Look, very interesting conversation, and thank you, Gus, for the report. I'm a supporter of a regionally coordinated, local authority supported, contribution to economic development. I do think that is within our statutory mandate, both under local government legislation and more broadly. I think the counterfactual, if we're talking about it, is an option that, is do nothing. That wasn't one of the options in the paper, but it's basically there isn't an economic development enterprise or initiative in the region, and I think that comes at the opportunity cost of the failure to capture some of those returns on investment that we can see in the paper and in the report itself. So I think that would be something that's, an opportunity too cost to incur, an opportunity cost too great to incur, if I can put it that way. I'm aware that there is a comment in the paper that in terms of our strategic goals, there is a fairly obscure direct fit. The word is that it's not a focus area or priority of our strategic plan, but we've got an enormous environmental agenda ahead of us. and we are going to need a strong economy to be able to draw upon in order to fund and resource, the immense environmental challenges we've got. I'm not saying that you do one as a trade for the other, but there is that reality underpinning our ambition. So I'm in favour of this, and I think I'm also aware of that what we're being asked here is not to decide on any option, but whether to contribute $10,000 to the completion of a process that we've already embarked on, that highlights the reasons that models such as Matariki have failed, and recommends a way forward that may not carry forward that baggage. So I'm supportive of the process being completed and coming back to us for consideration, consultation on the formation of a new CCO as a recommended option. And I think that's really all that's in front of us at the moment. And I certainly support the intent of the report and the completion of this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Will?
Thanks, Chair. I just felt when you're listing those requirements from the private sector, there's probably one thing critical and topical missing. And when you look at the return on investment that you list, it's all about new jobs or more tourists, and for that to occur, you obviously need, plenty of motel space and houses, and those two things are kind of at breaking point at the moment. We can't even house, the people we've got here. So I guess I'd just be wary of jumping in, throwing money and creating all this opportunity, but then there's either roadblocks or we simply put more strain on what is already pretty stressed out there.
Other questions or comments?
Just one final comment, Mr. Chair, that from experience, the more united a region is, and the more focused the mayors and chairs and leadership of a region are when they engage with central government, the more successful they can be. And in, for example, Matariki, if our mayors and chairs and key stakeholders are united in their priorities and ambitions for our region, our chances of success are a lot better than they have been in the past, Mr. Chair.
That's very right. Okay, do we have someone to move those recommendations then? And as Martin pointed out, it's costing just over $10,000.
I'll move.
Thank you, Martin. Sheriff, second. Just to speak again, Martin?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I covered what I wanted to share.
Anyone else wish to speak?
Well, Mr. Chair, there was one aspect I wondered whether we ought to include in the recommendations if this is to proceed, and that's around the climate resilience. So the report itself at paragraph 52 talks about the climate resilience to support future well-being. I wonder whether, but the activities to be contemplated in this are very much about business as usual, etc. So is there provision...
Would you like to add something in there?
I wonder whether, Martin, you'd be willing to include a recommendation that this next stage includes examination of how the structure might take a leadership role in supporting climate resilience for the regional economy.
Martin, you'd be happy to add something of that nature?
I've got no objection in principle, of course, on that. I'm wondering whether this is the right stage for that, but I guess if the final recommendations are coming back with a view or advice as to the new entity setting KPIs, whether it's its own KPI or for any supported agencies or entities, that they have a focus on, the climate mitigation, adaptation consequences of that activity. I'm just not sure how you'd word it, but putting that in the rubric of the final analysis, I'd have no difficulty with.
Sheriff is the seconder.
Yeah, I'll go along with Martin.
Craig, you would...
I'm opposed to that, Mr. Chair. All the organisations in there, I think, have declared climate emergencies. and are putting a lot of effort in this place. I appreciate the sentiment, absolutely, but to keep a crisp and clear focus on trying to find the best model to deliver economic development opportunities for Hawke's Bay, to try and keep it as simple as possible. We can reference those kind of things in the terms of reference as we go further down the track. It's just, we do this, then let's say Hastings' version of this may be something else. Wairau may have some other key issue they may want to add in, which is all fair enough. So I'm just very reluctant to support a change to the recommendations as just described.
Just a note, we just got a text from one of the co-chairs of Matariki, who is diligently watching us, one of the 5, saying that sustainability is already a pillar of the Matariki strategy.
Well, it's not in the recommendation. It's different than this. This is about a report about the future structure, not about what's currently in the Matariki strategy.
It will be looked at.
What do you want to do, Martin?
You're on mute.
Can you?
I'm not really in a position to wordsmith a change to the recommendation. I think Gus has heard the point.
Yep.
That we've got an interest, if we're supporting economic development, ensuring that it has got that climate change dimension.
Okay, I think we'll take that as written. It's written into every one of our things, Neil. So
Stick to the recommendations as they are.
Yes, Rick.
I want to speak against it.
Against which?
About the recommendation here. I'm probably going to vote for it, but I want to say that a number of things here. Firstly, I just want to respond to the point that was made before that we haven't given these entities in the past the money and the ability to speak on the region. Well, there's been good reason for that. You have money, you have to earn it, deserve it, given to you. And we've had economic development entities here, like Vision 2020, other things. We've had some terrible calamities. And as a consequence, large parts of the region are cynical about this. Secondly, the thing that I've said from the outset is that the KPIs for these entities are very vague and woolly. You cannot really identify what they do. Now, I admire the chair for his enthusiasm for Matariki and trying to make sure everybody's together and pull all this. I think he does a fantastic job of that. Couldn't see anybody better, but I don't share his enthusiasm or his commitment to the outcome. What we are faced with here is choices, and we're going to be spending money on this to create presumably more economic activity and more so on, and Will is exactly right. We have a housing crisis here at the moment. We cannot cope with housing our own people. So how are we going to do this in the future if we create more jobs? The other alternative for me is that I'm yet to be convinced that the economic wealth and prosperity of this region is driven by entities such as this. It's driven by the smart people in Horton. There are new fruits and new ways of doing things, new people figuring out new products, about the ups and downs of the agricultural sector, innovative farmers. These groups get nowhere near this. So I'm yet to be convinced they do that. Now, if we have to have one, because we have to have one, because that's what we all do, well, then say that. But what I'm going to be looking for is, this comes back, is some clear KPIs, some measurables, and a sign that everybody is committed and going to do stuff. But the last point I make about this is that we have to bring on to Neil's point a climate emergency coming across us. And we are going to be suffering in the long term significant ecological damage to our region. And here we are going to spend our resources on more business development, and what are we going to be spending on climate mitigation and so on. When you look at it, it's a derisory amount. And I just think the balance on this thing is not sits with me as well as it could do. Here we have a whole range of social issues which are unattended to. We're looking to create more activity which is going to compound those, such as housing. We have a climate emergency declared, and we're going to be generating other activity here which is contrary to that, and we're not spending resources on what we should be doing in mitigation. I think the balance of this isn't as good as I'd like to see it. So solve all the social ills when you come back to the next paper, Gus, and you might get my more enthusiastic support for it. But at the moment, I'm reserved.
Thank you, Rick. Neil?
Well, I am interested to speak to this proposal, Mr. Chair, and I echo some of the words of Councillor Barker on this, and Councillor Foley in particular, because where we're at is we've got $10 million across the region on an annual basis being spent on economic development. And this proposal is to tweak it some more and support that, and to rope in, stoke and fuel what we currently do. And what we currently do, the current economy, the current way that we operate, is on the cusp of major and catastrophic change, and we're not in a position to respond to it. And that was part of my rationale, Mr. Chair, in trying to shift the focus. If this entity was to focus solely on developing the region's economic resilience in the face of climate change, then would it have my 100% support. But it's not going to do that. It's going to stoke and fuel what we currently do, and what we currently do is not going to work very soon. I'm just looking in front of me a statistic that says Earth is now losing 1.2 trillion tonnes of ice each year, and it's going to get worse. 1.2 trillion tonnes. All the forecasts for our sea rise are out the window. We will see 1 to 2 metre rises within 30 years, not 50 or 100 years. That's the reality of what we're facing. What we it's in front of us, Mr. Chair, is a circumstance where at the turn of the a century ago, about the 1900s, we rode around on horses. The horses drove the economy. They were the means of transport and driving. We had motor vehicles coming down the track. And so we are asking us to invest in growing oats to feed horses, while we had the opportunity to do something around what's coming with the vehicle revolution that took place at that time. I put it in those terms because that's the analogy. We are looking to invest in the past by spending our 10 million doing what we currently do. We need to spend at least another 10 million doing things differently, changing our infrastructure, moving at great pace to mitigate and to move us out of this looming crisis. That's why I suggest this vehicle and this proposal is redundant, and we shouldn't be going down this road.
Any other speakers? Before I hand to Martin to wind it up, I'll just make a couple of comments. One of the underpinning principles of Matariki is social inclusion, because a few of us were really worried that we had when we set this in place, we had a very dynamic economy in Hawke's Bay, and a growing economy, underpinned by a couple of or several primary sector groups, but we also had a large section of our economy, of our people who live here, who the economy was surging forward and not taking them with them. So we had our stats on social housing, which we've talked a lot about today, on health, and some sectors of our economy is really poor. So Matariki is very focused that we grow a sustainable economy. We support and protect the businesses which we've already got on the plains, and that's where water storage and labour has been top of their agenda. But I don't think they're looking at bringing in huge new industries, although there has been talk about some innovation industries that would come in. But basically focusing on our core competency industries. And I just want to make one little comment. Our pip food industry, which I know a lot about, of course, is so successful, the most successful pip food industry in the world. And there's various reasons for that. One is the competency of the people that are doing it. One is our wonderful temperate climate. But another is our intellectual property. And half the funding for our intellectual property comes from the community, from the government. And these are ways which our community supports our local entrepreneurs to be the best in the world. And there's examples in the sheep and beef industry and in the other primary sector industries where the government does support new initiatives, and that's what keeps us in the front. So Matariki isn't perfect, it has its flaws, but it's a growing environment with new participants, and I'm absolutely certain we can make it work, and I'm absolutely certain it should underpin our economic strategy. So I think you did a wonderful report, Gus. It's not perfect either. I like the poetical sides as well. But it is a step forward in moving our community forward. So I'll hand over to you, Martin, to wind us up, and we're going to move these resolutions as is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All I really wanted to say in reply is that I think it's too blunt a proposition to suggest that to support economic development means we're supporting the past and the mistakes of the past. I wholeheartedly agree with the crisis ahead of us in terms of climate change, but I can't see any reason why the type of business we support, which would have to operate within the Zero Carbon Act and other legislative frameworks that we operate and are involved with, we can in fact be on the same page here. So with that said, I stand by the motion I put to accept the recommendations in the paper at paragraph, if you'll forgive me, 56. After paragraph 56 in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move it. We're going to move her in a seconder. All those in favour of the recommendations as they stand? Aye.
Aye.
Against?
Against.
And against.
I want to record an abstention.
Okay. Well, you want to record your vote against, Neil?
Yes, I'd like to.
Okay, we're going to record them. All those in favour, raise your hand. Against? And one abstention. Thank you.
Jury's out.
Jury's out. No, jury's not out. You lost. Okay.
No, you might win me over here. It's been hard to get today.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to item
Gus.
15.
Thank you. Good report.
Thank you, Gus. Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
And thank you, Tony, for your contributions to it as well. So we move to item 15, fixing the common seal. I know Rick traditionally just races to this, and
He has already done
we
so.
all appreciate it. But just everyone should be aware that we are issuing staff warrants, which are really important. So Rick, will you move?
Yeah, I still have to move staff warrants. I expect them to be on big badges.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder?
Yeah, got a seconder.
Thank you, Sheriff. We'll remove the recommendation then.
Just to make sure, just to ask the chair, the chief executive, all the staff warrants are completely consistent with the delegations as approved by this council to you and the staff.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. We do have 10 minutes to lunch, so I'm just wondering whether we can do the report on drinking water. Who's doing that? Annalie or Marianne? Oh. Well, it has to be you, James, I guess.
Bring the water.
So look, I think it's self-explanatory in
It is
terms of what the committee last did. Yeah, so it would have been Liz historically.
I wasn't
Her
here at
name's
this
not on the
meeting.
list, though.
So happy to take any questions if there are any.
Are there any questions on that paper?
Yes. What are the 6 fundamental principles of safe drinking water?
I could not tell you off the top of my head.
You don't vomit.
That you don't die afterwards. Well, actually, it would be quite interesting to get that out, James, that those 6 principles.
Yes.
Yeah, then on the follow-ups.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to move?
Do you move, Rick?
Yes.
I'll second.
Second, Henny Y. All those in favour of accepting recommendations?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Report on the Regional Transport Committee. Martin, do you want to have you got it in front of you?
Yeah.
Do you want to just take us through that then quickly?
Yeah, sure. Look, I mean, again, it's evident on its face. I guess echo the comments earlier about road safety activities over December, Boxing Day in particular. The point I really wish to draw out is that we're about to launch our Regional Land Transport Plan for consultation. That's been a lot of work over the last 12 months for the committee. So we adopted that plan in a form that we're happy to put to the public for consultation last December, and that consultation process is about to begin. Just some key word messages and themes for this Regional Land Transport Plan. It is about taking us into the future. We've got a real emphasis on innovation, public transport choices in particular, that are actually, I guess, useful, and an emphasis equally on safety. As I touched on before, we've had way too many deaths in the region last year. In particular, 22 people died on our roads, and we want to get that figure well down through the safety interventions we have planned. Another key emphasis is freight and efficiency of freight movement, and a priority on freight connections. And obviously, the topic of climate change is as with our strategic plan, it's absolutely the heart of every aspect of this Regional Land Transport Plan. So that's the philosophy of the plan, and look forward to the public getting involved. So there'll be a fair bit of communications traffic around that in the weeks ahead. I think that's all I really need to say. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, Martin? Craig?
Thanks, Martin. A question, just point number 7, the update you'd had about Napier Port related activities. The bit in the last line there, concern about the lack of Kiwi Rail input into regional transport planning. Could you just expand on that, noting that we've worked with Kiwi Rail in the past to help fund investigation and open up some other lines?
Yeah, well, I think that reflects the fact that we have a standing invitation, in fact, representation from Kiwi Rail on the committee, but the name tag on the desk has been fairly unoccupied. And so we haven't had that voice around the table, which has been disappointing. And yet rail is such an important part of, indeed, our Regional Land Transport Plan focus, as it is with the government policy statement on transport. So that's really what's reflected there, that it would be great to see Kiwi Rail more actively involved on the committee and with a regional focus in particular.
Thanks.
Who is it? Is it you, Jeff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Martin, just a question under point number 2. You talk about integration with the Regional Cycling Governance Group. What does that look like? And then I've got another comment to make.
Well, we're looking at reforming, I guess, and having more direct line of sight into the Regional Cycling Committee with participation directly on the Regional Transport Committee as part of it. But if you look for the word cycle in this Regional Land Transport Plan already, and ahead of that, I guess, better line of sight, there is a quite direct, repeated, deliberate and clear reference to the need to support safe cycling infrastructure that is used to ensure that that is an effective and desirable transport mode for the region into the future as well.
Another question. I looked up, BBC has always been a good form of information, and they are well researched. And I looked at what are the main key points how we can reduce climate change through emission. And number 1 was actually transport. So that actually burning of fossil fuels through transportation. In the plan, what are you proposing? What are you actually, because I haven't really heard or seen much from your committee that this is actually a key driver.
Oh, it absolutely is, and it's a bit like, as I said, the strategic plan. It's in every part of it. It's in all nooks and crannies of it. If you're looking at more innovative use of your road network, you're supporting mode shift And you're promoting cycling, use of rail, better public transport. Yes, you're quite right. Half of our carbon emissions profile has been the transportation sector. We have a number of tools in terms of putting the infrastructure in place, whether it's plug-in charging stations for electric vehicles, or incentivised parking for electric vehicles, or again for cycling, or supporting, as we've discussed today, the public on-demand public transport option. Those are all initiatives aimed at reducing, for our part of New Zealand as a region, our overall emissions footprint.
Thank you.
But it's not quantified. We haven't quantified. There isn't a specific target in terms of emissions reduction across the plan. I have to accept that.
Michelle?
Thanks, Mr Chair. Kia ora, Martin. Any update for the driver licensing program with regards Wairoa?
Yes, we approved funding last September for at least 1 year, and in principle for 2 years. 2 out of the 4 groups that we supported with that funding available do have a rural community and Wairoa focus, and I think one of the entities is actually the high school at Wairoa. And equally, so that's one direct where driver's licensing training would be happening, but we're equally supporting the training of new trainers. And the intent would be that the new trainers, are directed to, in particular, Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa. So we've got another governance group meeting of the driver's licence governance group next Monday. And we're talking with George Reedy about making sure, from a broader Hawke's Bay perspective, that we are reaching the right places where the support is most acutely needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Do I have someone to receive and move receiving and noting?
I'll happily second Martin's motion.
Martin, will you move? Yeah, did he move already? Oh, you'll second it.
No, I hadn't, but I move.
Martin moves, Rick seconds. Martin's already spoken. Rick, do you wish to speak?
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? All those in favour of receiving this report? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And Martin, thanks for your work on this. You've really stepped the game up on this committee, which we thought you would do when we appointed you there, but you've done a tremendous job, mate. Really good. Thank you very much. Now, we don't have any councillor reports today, so we're going to go to minor items. But Ian, wake up, Ian, down the back. Could you give us a 5-minute update on the TB situation?
Once the meeting's closed. Once the meeting's closed.
Okay, well, perhaps, do you want to wait till the meeting's closed, or?
Yes, I think
okay, we'll wait till the meeting's closed, but yeah, I just didn't want you to run away. Okay, Martin, what is it? Social ecology.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it was a thought that was really fostered by speaking, when we had the environmental awards last December, to one of the trustees on the Marae Tautura trust that was doing the stream restoration. And it was also a thought that came out of the presentations to the Environment Committee in the September meeting, I think, where we had the Homoana Care Group and Forest and Bird, Napier or Hawke's Bay attend. And the suggestion was put to me that there are so many of these different diverse groups doing wonderful things within Hawke's Bay, the bandwidth and reach of which, we just can't deliver as an organisation on our own, that perhaps we could, as we do, I guess, through the biodiversity strategy in a sense, but we could host an open day where each of these groups gets to present to the other groups, and they get to connect and form networks and understand where the duplication is, where the gaps are, what each other's doing, the learnings, and the synergy that's created through that collective exercise or enterprise really does form that ecosystem that we're after. To help us reach our strategic outcomes as a region, it could be a very low cost intervention with quite significant returns. So that was the topic. Is there any way that we could, on an annual basis, for example, just host, coordinate, or whatever, publicise that kind of social ecology network?
Thank you, Martin. Gareth?
Oh, sorry.
Do you want to comment on that?
I'm just wondering whether, Ian, just a reminder for councillors that we do co-fund Dr. Edgar Burns, who's our resident expert in social ecology, as a social ecologist, and under that.
Environment and Integrated Catchment Committee meeting, we're proposing to bring Edgar and his university head of school to present his plan and work in that space.
So perhaps picking up that suggestion and that discussion might be the thing to do.
Jeff?
Good. For a second year in a row, I've been made aware of some activity on State Highway 2. There's a farmer with several farms who takes it upon himself to cultivate his whole farm wherever he can drive a tractor.
State Highway 5.
State Highway 5, sorry. Able to drive it wherever he can drive a tractor. He will actually move a cultivator. And I've even seen a face last year where he actually started up a slope that steep that the tractor actually started to slip and the operator had to back out. So a neighbour of that particular farmer alerted me. I went to visit last year. He actually had to put in dams, silt trap dams in. He's grateful for the topsoil that he's receiving, but but at the same time it's the wrong practice. And this year particularly, some of the cultivation actually happened a metre away from a flowing waterway. And of course it's dry, but you only need about 15 to 20 mil and all this topsoil will just end up into more waterway. I've spoken to staff about this. Unfortunately, we haven't got the teeth at this stage to actually activate any compliance, but I still believe that we actually should make the public aware that this actually is not acceptable. I think we should do this in conjunction with the farming community. We shouldn't actually sort of point fingers and point blame and tell them how bad they are. We actually should work as a Hawkesbury Regional Council together with the farming community to see if we actually can make this a negative into a positive story where people are being made aware, and maybe some peer pressure can be put on farmers who undertake these practices to stop that from doing, because there's actually a vision on them, and hopefully that will work until we get to the point where we have plan changes which actually will stop this kind of activity.
Thank you, Jeff. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, look, so we are familiar with the situation, and we've previously engaged the landowner. The council is quite correct that we don't have rules that at the moment under the Regional Resource Management Plan that make it prohibited to undertake the cultivation. However, if there is sediment discharge to the waterway as a result following rainfall, we can take enforcement action, and we have indicated to the landowner that we would be watching very closely following a rain event. There are new regulations around cultivation on slope coming from central government, and they will be being rolled out progressively, and we'll be then taking enforcement action. So we would hope these sorts of activities are very much a thing of the past in the future.
Thank you, James. I mean, no matter what you do, you have people that do foolish things. There's no doubt about that. I just wanted to have a quick comment about H-Buds. Many of you be aware that there's a lot of community activity and concern that that our councils, our TLAs are building houses on productive land and not looking at other innovative approaches. H-Buds was set up to deal with this, but really, if you read the H-Buds constitution, it is about how they do expand on into industrial sites and housing sites, rather than the focus being on protection of productive soils. There's a lot of talk about it. I want to meet with our representatives on H-Buds and talk about our involvement in this, because I think it's an issue that's not only highlighted in the community at the moment, but it's really important to us too. We don't want to do what they've done in some places around the world, just expanded our communities onto the very land that we depend on. So I just wanted to raise that as an issue to be thought about as we go forward this year. So that is the end of our formal meeting. So we will close our meeting, and then I'd ask Ian just to give us a quick update on the TB situation. Over to you, Patty.
Kia ora, Chair. Kua whakatakoto hia ngā mihi, kua maringi hia ngā roimata, tēnei te mihi kia rātou kua mene atu. O ki mai au ki a koe rā Charles, te matangai tō tuahine rā i Tākuta Rose, i te rātau, no reira hoki mai rā ki te ao mārama, hoki mai rā ke runga ki tēnei tēpu. Hoki mai rā ki a tātau, e heka mā tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai, i o tātou riki, o i raiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te Wastewater, ake, ake, āmene. Kia ora tātou.